just wanted to confirm who is going to take notes. Okay, perfect, Ashley.
Yeah, I am.
All right. So we'll do the usual start. Let's introduce ourselves.
Ashley
Colette
Angus.
Oh, Colette Abraham.
Alexa Wilcoxman.
Oops. Katie Cook. Oh. Should we go in alphabetical order?
Oh.
Michaela Wilson.
Was that everybody? Okay. Perfect. Let me turn off my phone. Let me open up my little questions here, and we'll just kind of go down. Okay. So who was able to get through the whole book by today?
Well, congratulations.
I did. It was awesome.
Good job, Ashley.
Yeah,
I got about 3/4 of the way.
I didn't put it down. Started. Had to finish it.
Yeah.
Yep, I finished it too. So yeah,
Yeah, it was so good.
yeah, easy, quick read.
All right. So, how has your understanding of perception increased on the process of international policy and law? And maybe this week we could just kind of take turns. Anybody want to start the conversation? What you learned about the international policy, perceptions of policy process?
Well, I was blown away by how people just think that they can just influence everybody with what they want done. Yesterday when I was reading, I couldn't write my notes fast enough, and I had to get a bigger piece of paper. I was at work reading. But, yeah, I didn't realize it was up for debate to be changed all the time. That really bothers me.
We learned that it was all opinion and it's not empirical data, it's not up for voting, it's actually quite terrifying.
It's open for bullying. That was discouraging, you know.
I recall there was a quote where they said, let's see, the pin is greater than the sword, and it was added by, I think it was Sue, is that the name of the lady? It was added that she's like, yeah, because it writes checks. So that was kind of terrifying too.
Yeah.
What I was surprised with was when he first went to the UN and gave his presentation when they like mistook his identity, you know, how he's having the beard, and he went to this, he did his presentation about how international law affects domestic law, and people were just like, oh really? Well, we just go along with whatever, you know, whatever policy is presented just because we want to leave early. We're tired of being here, and so we didn't really think that it had any bearing when we go back home. And then, you know, they kept asking him for copies of his presentation. I'm like, wait, how does that not have any effect on what you're doing? You know, like they just like, I'm just wanting to get this done and over with. I didn't really think that there was any like significant relation to what happens when you go back home, and that was really like surprising to me that they didn't think that there was a correlation there.
You know, you kind of wonder, what did they think they were doing there? Just passing the time? Yeah, that was interesting to me too.
Yeah, that was something that really stood out to me, because when I was reading it, I was like, isn't that terrifying that the people that are making these decisions don't even think that they have an impact? So they're like, oh, whatever, just whatever you say can go because it's not really going to affect anyone. So they're just willing to pass whatever just because they don't want to spend time arguing about their opinions. because they think it won't change anything.
Well, I was surprised at how much weight was given to those women from the Women's Caucus, and people listened to them just because they were trying to push forward their own agenda. So.
Yeah, I like that part too, like what Michaela was saying, how like they are just there. Like I kind of thought about that, like what our government's doing now. Like sometimes I feel like they're kind of just there because, you know, it's their job, but I don't know. It was just really eye-opening to me after reading this book.
Yeah, that's a quote I wrote down where they said it's a force of attitude of go along to get along.
Yep.
And that's when he said, I'm clearly here not to educate, but to strengthen. So
I really liked how the people came across as being relieved that he was there to be the leader. You know, that they were more than willing to stand up with him, but it's like they had lost their place and lost their way, and he really stood out as a leader to them. You know, the Islamic people and the Catholic charity, or the Catholic group, and you know, that was, I don't know, I guess it's a reminder of why we need to stand up for what we believe in.
I think one of the biggest lessons I learned from him is he wasn't scared of conflict.
I know.
He just kind of stood up and said, oh my goodness, how long are you guys going to argue? There's things put into place. Let's get started.
I was reading that yesterday. I must have had my mouth open. I just couldn't read fast enough to find out what happened. It's like, I couldn't believe it.
That was like my favorite part. I was like, holy cow, he just owned them just by coming out and being like, where is your justice in this? He's like, I've been sitting here listening to this, and it's the most nonsensical injustice. Like, it's been decided how it's going to happen. Just be quiet and let's get this over with.
I think that's actually a pretty good lead into the next question. I was anxious about this question because I saw the Lord in this all over the place. But what role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the family of the world, and what lessons did you learn for your own efforts?
So I guess the thing that I wrote down with that question, I wrote down, when we know and understand sacred things, the Lord will bring them to our remembrance, and we'll be able to recall them and to apply them in a meaningful way and in important ways when we need to, if we've studied and prepared ourselves spiritually and like I said, with those sacred things. And we'll be able to say them in a way that maybe isn't religious, but you know, communicate the Lord's will and those thoughts and feelings that we've had in a proper way.
Yeah, and that's something I recognized as he kept thinking back to the scriptures, and he kept thinking back to Job, and he kept thinking back to Mosiah, and he kept thinking, and that was very pertinent.
Oh, and the words of Korihor, I mean, that just gave me chills. I wrote down for that question, I wrote down his thing, no mortal intellect is self-sufficient. And this morning in my devotional, I had this little book, and it referenced John 2:17, which read, he and his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. And I didn't know what that meant. But the explanation that went with it was many of your friends, neighbors, and loved ones have been denied the security of a single standard for determining ethical attitudes and behavior. They carry the crushing burden of creating their own standard for right and wrong, a standard doomed certain to lead them to destruction. I mean, isn't that what we're facing today? And Paul said, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies in living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to rest and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. How can you form values that more accurately represent God's character and truth? By spending time reading and discussing his word with him. As your thinking changes, your values, attitudes, responses, and actions will follow. Rather than allowing the world's value system to squeeze you into its own mold, God's word shapes your thoughts and in turn your values. Wasn't that fantastic? I thought that it totally explained the book and what we've been studying the last couple of weeks. I was so glad I read that this morning.
I would underline "do not conform" with red pencil, I think.
Wasn't that fantastic? Because I think, so many people are just blown as chaff in the wind, and they have no direction in their lives.
Any other thoughts on that question?
I just really, as I was reading the story, it was amazing. I really liked how he kept relating his position to other prophets that are in the scriptures, and it made me think of, I don't know, am I willing to have the determination and the will and the courage to stand up and advocate my position when I know that the majority of people aren't going to listen? And that's really the role of the prophets. I mean, we see that the prophets, they know that people, the majority of the response that they're going to get is opposition, and you can't tell people what they're doing wrong, because obviously they're not going to listen. But I don't know, just the position of being a prophet is so hard. Is it really worth, advocating something for one person, just to change one person, just to help one person? And if you ask those prophets, if you ask the prophet today, he would say absolutely. And, if I were going to the UN and saying, I have no idea why I'm going, I'm just going because I feel like I need to for some unknown reason, and then go to the great and big spacious building and say my position when I know that the majority is not going to listen, but there at least is one listening ear, would I be willing to do that? And I would want to say no. I would be too scared. And it just made me think of all of the prophets that he mentioned, how great of an example that they are to me, because I know that I would be so scared to do it. I don't know. It was just amazing to see who the Lord has called and who he calls to be his advocates. And I after I read the book, I said a prayer, and I was like, help me have that same desire to want to be that way. So it was just interesting how his stories aligned with a lot of the prophets in the scriptures. We just need to have faith and to do what's right.
I noticed that specifically because he clearly said how fearful he was. He even made the comment that I've been in front of the Supreme Court and never had the problems I had here. But and that's just what I noticed is another place where you saw the Lord, and it was he prepped him. He already knew he was going to be chosen as a speaker, and he was also warned it was going to be challenging. So Heavenly Father said it like it was from the beginning, so he had all that prep time in the short amount of time that he had. It was very clear messages to him.
Well, I thought that was a really clear indication that the Lord was with us by his side because of his writing and speaking requirements, and the words were put there that he needed, and even when his time was cut shorter, he was able to say what affected the audience. So I mean, have you ever had experiences like that where you've, written or spoken stuff that it didn't actually come from me?
Yeah, it's awesome. Speaking of which, before Alexis gets kicked off again, do you have some thoughts to add?
I know. I don't know why it keeps kicking me off, but that was basically what I was gonna say. Is just like I was just blown away that he was such an example, because I thought of my life and what Susan said. There are so many times where I have said something and I can't believe that came out of my mouth, but I know that it was Heavenly Father, and I needed to say those for someone to listen to. But that she kind of just said what I was gonna say, but.
So, Michaela, what do you think stood out for you where you saw the Lord and all that he did throughout the book?
I definitely agree with what everyone's been saying. One thing that really kind of struck me is that even though there was so much against him, there's nothing that they could do that could like prevent the Lord from making a way for him to go and to be able to speak. And then, even though he was just one speaker and he had only a short amount of time and there were so many other speakers that were completely against everything he was saying, his still had the power to like touch other people and influence other people, even though there was like so much opposition. It just kind of made me think like people deep down somewhere in them know what is right, and like they are instilled with that light of Christ within them, and that when someone speaks truth, they are just automatically drawn to that. And even though we may think like we are alone in our beliefs, we really aren't. Kind of like that phrase he kept bringing up that I don't know, one of the leaders said to him, like, where have you been? Like, there are so many other people that believe what we believe and know and want to do something. They just don't know how or don't have the means. And so when we do, they're kind of like, oh, my goodness, thank you. That's the support I needed. Like, where have you been?
Okay.
That's obviously one of the pertinent parts of this book was when he's like, I really don't know what I'm doing here. He calls his wife, and of course, her wisdom, she says, pull out that proclamation. And he drew it all up and pulled from it. And then his drama coach was like, this isn't going to work. You should do this. And he pretty much thought to himself, these are the prophet's words. I'm going to use them.
Yeah, I opened it. And they're still
Yeah. So what are you thinking, Colette? I can see some thoughts in your mind.
Before they fall apart, they're all embers.
No, I'm just agreeing with all of you, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to add to it. I think you guys have spoken well about the whole thing. Like I said before, that when we understand and know sacred things for ourselves, then it will bless us in all aspects of our life.
You know what's crazy is like when he gave his like presentation or whatever, the two women that came up to him and they had edited the remarks because they were kind of nasty. But it was just like kind of what Michaela was saying was everyone ultimately knows what truth is, and those that are pure, of heart, will take that to motivate them to better their life. They won't take it hard. But those that are guilty will take the truth to be hard. And it was, right now I'm reading in Jacob, the book of Jacob, where Jacob is just schooling all of the Nephites, and he's like, the guiltiest take the truth to be hard, and you should not be that way. And it was just, when I read, this book, I'm like, oh my gosh, these people really do that. They are absolutely angry with the truth, and it's just so, because when I read in the scriptures, I'm like, how can people be that way? But, we had a great example of how either people take it and they run with it and they accept it and they want to better their lives, or they're absolutely angry. They labor in sin. And I don't know, it was just amazing that those women did what they did and how angry they were with him because of the truth.
And the only choice that they have is, go on a power trip and try to get some kind of glory out of it.
I read something this week, I don't know where it was in the Ensign, maybe, that it was another testament that the Book of Mormon was written for our time and not from Joseph Smith's time, because they didn't have any of these arguments in Joseph Smith's time. And, like what he said about Korihor and what she just said about the guilty will take the truth to be hard. I mean, that's exactly for our times. It fits this so perfectly.
I don't know, because just this morning in seminary, there's this really cool video of this young lady who takes the exact words from Joseph Smith when he was wondering. Has anybody ever seen that? It's called Origin. You have to see this. It's only like 3 minutes long, but it's this young teenager that she doesn't talk, but it's her thinking in her mind, and it's those words from Joseph Smith about confusion and I don't know what party to join, and it shows all these signs and her talking in college, and there's a big atheist across the chalkboard. It's just interesting how it all stands the test of time. I'm going to send a link because it's a fantastic video. It looks like he also, I wrote he went into debt for it because he kept making so many copies, and I had no idea the copies could be so expensive.
I know.
Okay, so this is definitely the part I want to talk about. On the third question, some supporting roles, which are always so important. Even though the book was largely about Richard's experience, what important supporting roles did you see others playing in this account, and why is it important to recognize this?
I really like the one where after he spoke up and cut the woman off about the screaming, all the judges on the panel were so relieved and so glad, and all for the rest of the time that he was at the conference, they would always smile at him and recognize him, and it's like he had extended their power back to them. So I think they were definitely supporting roles.
So, like, Michaela, was there a favorite supporting role for you? That's kind of a good way to ask a question. What was your guys' one of your favorite supporting roles?
Well, I'm just going to come out and say the obvious one, like his wife.
Mm-hmm.
He always went to her when he was having troubles, when all those ladies were speaking and he couldn't concentrate on writing his speech, and like just, I don't know, maybe it's because I can relate to the wife situation better than any of the other ones in there, but I just think that it's so important, and in the background it's kind of an example of what he's fighting for. He's fighting for families, and then there he is being an example of how supportive a family can really be, like how much good you can really do as a family, and how that, I don't know, it was kind of like a background theme of he's teaching this, and look how it really is in his life. It really is doing good in his life. It's not just he's preaching it and there's no example. I don't know if that even makes sense.
Oh, that's great.
That was like a perfect example because he was living what he was fighting for, right?
Yep.
That was my favorite one too, Michaela. Like after I read the book, I was like realizing how much my husband relies on me. Like sometimes I feel like it's kind of annoying. Like, come on, you're smart enough, you can do things. But I think that it's really an eye-opening that we're supposed to do that, and it's important. And not only are we being examples to like our children or our other friends and families, but we're being examples to those that think, that you don't need a family, you don't need to get married, or they have just different opinions on families. Like it was just a real eye-opening. I really liked his wife in the book. Like she was awesome.
You guys would appreciate what my husband said last night, because I pull him into a lot of my homework because we're both interested in all of this, and he said, I know that they say that's going to be 2 priesthood holders that save, that come in and save the Constitution, but he said it's actually going to be their wives.
Aww.
Helping them, because it's all going to be about their wives. Okay, so there were a lot more supporting roles I would love to cover. What were some that stood out for you, Ashley and Colette?
I definitely his wife. She was so intuitive, she knew that she needed to put the family proclamation in a suitcase, and sometimes, we need to, just those small promptings, we really, really need to act on those, and how awesome that was that she felt that she needed to do that as he was leaving. And the other one was, I think her name was Susan, who he worked with, who's like, hey, I have a feeling that you should go. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to be doing, but you should come anyway. And she acted on that prompting as well, that she's like, I don't know, just please come. And she didn't give up on him even when he was like, I got plans, I got this and this, and I can't. And she's like, well, I really think that you should come. She didn't really give up on him. She kept acting on her prompting to ask him to go. And her son went in the book. Her son was there. I think his name was Bradley. And they spent a lot of the night, writing up documents and changing the languages and stuff. And sometimes, I don't know, I tend to be a follower, I think, in a lot of cases. And sometimes people just need to have that leader of saying, this is the plan, let's do this. And they, no complaining, no nothing. I can't believe how many sleepless nights they had, and they were willing to stay up all night with Richard and, and make these documents. And sometimes are we willing enough just to sacrifice that little time to make things work and fight for a cause that we believe in? And so I think a lot of those people that he surrounded himself with around that time in that convention, really helped him in his role there.
I like how you said in his role. They all had a role, but in the end, he was the one up front in his role. So it all works together. Have some thoughts, Colette?
I also thought about Susan and the wife, and as each of you shared what you had to say about both of them, just reiterated to me how important it is for all of us to be in tune to the Spirit, not just the one going to do the work, or but all of us to live close to the Spirit so that we can receive those promptings and act on them and encourage them and not give up like Susan. And then what I wrote down for that question, it was more of a generalization, and I just put that it's important for others to stick up for their own culture and their own religion. And when I say others, I'm referring to others, at the UN. But and then for us to be respectful of that and to find the things that we have in common with them, the good that we have in common, so that we can, team together and stand up for good together and join with them, join theirs with ours type thing. So, like I said, mine was more of a general than specifically. But just the importance of being respectful of others and their views, and like I said, finding the good that we can combine with our own, and being a team together.
So something you said earlier brought what I have on my list. I have a whole bunch of lists, but I won't name them all. But you said something that triggered something I want to share, and it's one of the supporting roles was President Hinckley, because he presented the proclamation. And another supporting role was his scriptures, because he talked about how he was reading his scriptures. He was always reading scriptures. And I started with the physical supporting roles, and then I found myself going to the scriptures and prayer, and I'm like, of course these are supporting roles. Why am I not writing that down? So, anybody else have thoughts on that one?
Well, you brought up President Hinckley, and I really liked reading, I call it the preamble to what President Hinckley said the night he presented the document. And we don't see that very often, and he outlined why it was so important and why they had put it together. And I really appreciated that reminder.
Yeah. Turned it off. So can I just share a quick story?
Always.
As you guys are talking, I'm thinking about 10 years ago when I was talking to a friend, and I'll try to make this fast because I didn't want to take a lot of time since I'm the lead or whatever you want to call it. But about 10 years ago, I got involved with some of this political type of stuff and advocacy with a friend, but it was mostly, we started at a school level and like school board level. And she brought me a book, and it happened to be one of these people who had that experience to the UN. And I've always kept it in the back of my head and, peeked through it at that time, but then never touched it, but it was always there because I still had small kids. And it has been amazing how now that my kids are grown, how that book seemed to reappear. And I found myself saying, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? Because here I am launching my kids, and I feel drawn to do something, but I don't know what it is. And I was driving in my car, and he said, go back to school. And I said, are you kidding me? I've got 2 in college right now and 1 going on a mission. I said, I can't pay for that. And instantly he said, I will provide. So I went home. I didn't even question it. And I started looking back up and getting signed back up at BYU. And I was very nervous because we just did not have the finances. But he said he'd provide. And I have to say that he did. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to take? And through the process, long process, it came to marriage and family studies, and I'm like, okay, I was thinking business, but cool, family, and it just brought me back those 10 years because I'm so passionate about my family. But he did provide, and not only that, he paid for college, and I'm sorry I'm taking so long on this, but it's awesome. And my friend called me and she said, hey, there's a World Conference for World Congress of Families in Salt Lake where a lot of these advocates get together and delegates from other countries, and I'm like, I can't afford that. But when my school was paid for the exact amount, and I've never been able to say this in my life, and I always thought people were like, are you sure you really was it the exact amount to the penny? It was the exact amount to the penny to pay for that trip, and so I didn't even question it, and it's the first time I didn't talk to my husband about it. I actually told him what I was doing, and I went down there, and yeah, well, I skipped the part though, she said that, and I said I can't go, and the Lord said you should go, and I said I can't pay for it, and he said I'll provide. And it's just kind of interesting that he kept saying I'll provide, I'll provide. Sorry, I should have said that a little faster, but I just wanted to share.
That's fantastic. Your words are so similar to mine. It's like, it's scary.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Incredible.
I think that's why I wanted to share, because I think everybody can familiarize with why they're sitting where they are right now. Oh, I tried to do that. I ran out of breath. I was trying to say that so fast.
You did great.
Okay, so ponder your readings from A Sacred Duty. What are some consequences and risks of minimizing or eliminating family and religion from public policy? And Ashley, I have to admit, I'm curious what you were thinking on this question. But not to put you on the spot.
Oh my goodness, I wish, I just wish my husband's probably so tired of me talking about policy stuff, because I was really excited to also read that other book that we read the 2 chapters from, the Family Policy Matters, or whatever it was called. And when I was realizing how she said in the book that a lot of our policies are aimed for individualism rather than familyism. And, I was just like, oh my word, if we are always constantly focused on the individual, we are only perpetuating the problems that we are trying to solve. And because I'm like, what were their definitions of poverty, or what were their, from the UN, how were they poverty? And they started talking about abortions and, all of this stuff that was absolutely contrary to what actually was what needed to be done. And if they focused on familyism, of how maybe they could help families become closer, maybe give incentives for, being married or whatever, that could curb something rather than just getting an abortion. And I was like, man, if we could only stop focusing on individuals and focus on the family unit, what better policies would come out of that? And politics is absolutely insane right now. And when I notice what's being proposed now by the candidates, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're only just going in the same cycle. If people just stopped and said, hey, let's focus on the family, let's come up with different compromises, then what better ways can we stop, increasing divorce rates or teen pregnancies or all of this stuff? It was just, we're only perpetuating the problem when we focus on the individual. That's my thoughts right now.
And at this conference, all of us were wondering how and why would people want to do this, and they went in depth about people's addiction to money and power. It just overrides any kind of logic, and back to the individualism, but anybody else?
I'll go ahead. I just wrote family's who we are. It's our starting point. It's where we learn and we grow, and We become who we are in a huge sense. And family and religion bring values, and like Ashley said, the focus is less on self and individualism and more on, family and others. And we can't risk losing that, because it's who we are and it's what we're about, and you can't replace what we can gain and learn within the family unit. They bring stability.
Yep.
Yeah, I like how you said stability, because that's what I was kind of thinking. Like, I feel like if you got rid of like all of everything, like religion or anything that had to do with like the family, I think that everything would just fall apart. And I think that people need to, like Ashley said, they need to stop thinking of individuals. They need to think as a whole. So if they get rid of one thing, what will happen to the next? And I think that if they get rid of all that stuff, everything will just fall apart.
Yeah. And that's what I loved about when he did his short, concise presentation, since he was shoved off to 4 minutes. He was able to use natural laws to insert from the proclamation of the family. But I have to say that when I read that question, my thought went to 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 13, where it says, and this is more on the religion side of the question and not the family, but it says, if you say that there is no law, ye shall say that there is no sin. If you say that there is no sin, you shall say that there is no righteousness. And if there be no righteousness, there be no happiness. And if there be no happiness, there be no punishment nor misery. And if these things are not, then there is no God. And if there's no God, we are not, neither the earth, for there could be no creation of things, neither to act nor be acted upon, wherefore all things must vanish away. And I kind of see that as we are taking God out, we as a population are literally vanishing away, because people aren't having children, people aren't getting married, people are having abortions, and we're like bringing on our own extinction.
Excuse me.
I also think too that if some of the consequences or risks, I think of, as we take those terminologies out, like God or family or husband or spouse, and we replace them with those other words, then that turns into different definitions. And then people have different opinions about different definitions, and that's where we get caught up. And, if we all agreed on what marriage was and is, we wouldn't have all of these issues, I think. If we just all, if we didn't take out, can you believe all the different terminologies for gender? I can't, that is just amazing to me. Like, no, it is male and female for a divine purpose. We are created male and female for a reason. We have a divine destiny. And I think if that was just cemented in policy or religion, we wouldn't have all of these issues and we wouldn't have all these differences of opinions, but we do. And then we have all of these consequences that follow. Well, we can justify this thing and we can justify that thing, or we'll throw this in here and it'll be okay. And it's just amazing to me. If we all just agreed on something, we wouldn't have all of these ripple effects just redefining something.
And the vocabulary, I'm glad they put the section in where they talked about the buzzwords in the code. They make everything sound so healthy, and just like that video we watched a couple weeks ago, they made it sound like it was so beneficial to have these children's rights.
Yeah, and just just thinking about how they're trying to take religion out of policy. Most of us get our moral values from our religions. And so if they start trying to take out religion, eventually it's going to turn out to them just trying to take out every moral value. Things are going to become like legal that used to be considered terrible just because if it's a moral value, it's considered religious, and we can't have religion in policy, and like, I don't know, I think it's going to just spiral into turning into just whatever you want to do, you do it, and we'll protect your right to do it. Like, there's going to be no morals anymore in society.
And that's such a perfect opener for the last question, but before I jump there, I just want to make sure nobody has some thoughts on that. No thoughts?
Katie, I don't know if anybody else can hear you, but you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Okay. I thought nobody else say anything. Is she muted?
And I actually said something really smart. So, the last question. What do you think we can do about it? Does the author implicitly or explicitly make realistic suggestions for ordinary citizens as well as those in a position of power and influence? So, y'all have to answer this because we have to figure out what our role is in all of this. What are your thoughts? Let's see. I'm trying to think who hasn't talked a lot. Colette, I haven't heard a lot from you today.
I was wanting to wait for everybody else to answer that question. You know, since I have gone back to school, and I'm kind of similar to you, Katie, and I was going to do business, and that was more practical and more, you know, career ready. And I just keep thinking, what is my place in this, and what can I do, little old me? And as we study and read the book, and you know, I don't know, just preparing ourselves intellectually and with knowledge, and spiritually too. You know, having both of those to be a part of who we are, so that we can advocate, we can say things in a way that will draw others, so that they'll ask, "Where have we been?" You know. And I just keep thinking, I need to do my part, and some of that is little things, and some of it's bigger things. And if I stay close to the Lord, I'll know what it is that I need to do, and what my purpose in this whole thing really is.
And I love how you say we got to work on our spirit. One of the most important things that stood out for me in the book was he wanted to take the sacrament, and he wasn't going to miss the sacrament. That was important. Who else? Should I pick on you, or y'all just want to speak up?
I feel like I've been running at the mouth. I've been so excited to talk to all of you today. But what can we do about it? I think it was from Mrs. Barlow that spoke the other day in that presentation. You know, if you're married, use your title Mrs. You know, be glad for it. Speak lovingly of your husband. You know, tell people how much you love your children, and you know, that you do seminary, and your family. You know, mention your family. I really thought that was a great thing to do, but I just got called into the Stake Relief Society, so this sentence has been running through my head for 2 weeks. And you know, we've got such a blessed opportunity to be here now, and I think all of us can take all of this information to our stakes and our wards and share with them the need to speak up and to let them know what's going on, because it's just appalling. But you know, how important it is to do the things that are going to protect their families. So I'll cut that short.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think one of the things is just like listening to the Spirit, like I said, and just using your own resources, like your talents, your abilities, the opportunities that are open to you to try and make a difference. Like, the other day I was talking to my mom right after reading this book, and I brought up the book, and I don't know, we were just talking about it, and just as soon as my dad got home, and my dad's bishop back in that home ward, and we were talking about it, and he's like, sometimes I wish that we just had a family class. Like, we have gospel principles, gospel doctrine, we should have family, and it should be like a common, I don't know, something that is taught a lot, because people just overlook it because it's just been a part of their lives. They just think it comes naturally, and
Yeah.
so it's almost like it just gets overlooked. And I was talking to him about it, and he actually was like, "Oh, Kayla, I so wish you were here. I would totally like call you to do like a whole ton of things." And so I kind of like took that as, I don't know, the Lord almost being like, you need to share what you know. And so I talked with my dad, and we worked out a time where I can actually travel back home, and he's going to set up a youth fireside where I get to speak about families.
Wow.
And even like I just barely got married, I still consider myself a youth sometimes, and here I am having to go and try and teach these kids, but no, like, it just kind of made me realize, like, that's why we're learning these things, is to share where we are able to share, just to do what we're able to do.
And you're going to do awesome, because we've been totally trained up how to research, right? You know how to research now.
That's great.
Is Alexa paused, or are you there? Yay!
Oh, no. I was going to say, I love that you shared that, Michaela, because I'm kind of like in your boat. Like, I don't know how old you are, but I'm a young mom, and I'm a young mom of 2 kids that are less than a year apart. And everybody asks me all the time about, like, what was I thinking? I was like, I didn't think anything of that. But I think it's really important that we share, even though we feel like we don't know anything. Like you said, we're just starting out. But you know what? I was on Facebook the other day, and someone said that they really enjoy how they just see all the things that I post to my kids and how happy they are, because it makes them want the same thing. And I just, like, I never realized that they were, like, that into my stuff to where they would say that I really enjoy it and I really want that for myself. And I was just, like, I was shocked. So I think that it's just really important to show people what families are, what they could have if they follow the right, and they know what is right instead of what's wrong, and what the world is saying is right. But that's kind of what I thought about.
So you're saying the same exact things that Richard is saying, You're just doing it, you're not doing it at an international level, you're doing it right here where we're supposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like when my dad first asked me to come and speak to the youth, I was like, I don't have any kids. I've only been married for just a year. Like, they're going to look at me and be like, you have no experience. Like, how can you be talking to me like this? But, I mean, I am part of a family. I've been in a family since birth. Like, I have a great family with examples to pull from. And so I think that sometimes we kind of get in that, oh, you only know what a family is until when you create your own. But we're in a family from the beginning, and so it was kind of a comfort when my dad brought that up. He was like, no, you have experience.
And you've got all this knowledge.
I'll tell you what, you know a lot more than I did when I first got married. I wish I could go back and have the information I have now. But I'm done.
I know. I wonder how badly I messed up my kids. I'm always apologizing. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry.
And I just want to throw in, I always say sorry to him that I mess up as a mother, but I always remind him, don't forget your mom and dad stayed together, and that was probably the best thing we could have done.
Yeah.
I actually like you, Michaela. I last week it was funny because after our discussion on here, I actually went on Facebook and I started looking at marriage groups on Facebook to see if there were any, profiles up that just talked about marriage. And then I was like, and I thought about emailing all of you guys and saying, hey, let's start a Facebook page. And then I went back to our class, and they're like, Facebook page, Title of Liberty. And I was like, oh. And then my visiting teachers came over last week, and we started talking about families. And I showed them one of the books that I had from class. And they're like, we really need a class where we can come and we can talk about how we can defend the family and use, secular words with a moral, principle or background. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good idea. So I went to talk to one of the institute directors here who actually had written one of the institute books that are used in the different institutes. And so I gave him Brother Gardner, I think, is the big wig here at school that we get. Yeah, that one, Susan, yeah. I was like, we need a class that has all of these books that we can just come out. And so I said, if you want to write a curriculum, you should talk to this guy. And I'm so willing to do anything that I can. And so we'll see where that goes. But I just got so excited because this is something we all feel passionate about, and it would be so cool to start something. And to answer the question, I was really moved by his story about going to the mosque. I thought that was so cool. It's so funny because at my house, actually on the wall over there, I have some Buddhist symbols, Celtic symbols, all of these things, because when I took a comparative religions course at a different college, I could see all of these things that resembled our faith. It was a little snippet of truth. And I was so touched by his story that I actually started Googling prayer rugs. Probably put myself on a government watch list. But I was so moved because like him, when I was at the community college and I had to stand up in front of the class and basically rehearse the proclamation of the family in front of all of these people, it was so hard to do that, and I felt like it was me against them, and I was just trying to keep myself above water, and I just became so bitter, and I became so angry because I was like, you people are so stupid. I can't stand you people anymore. I don't want to be in this class. You guys are terrible people. And I became so mad, and so I felt kind of like he did, where he actually said this. He goes, whereas I had believed myself involved in angry battle against evil people, I now, in one instant and powerful change of disposition, I wanted only to touch their hearts. I wanted them to understand blah, 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 blah. And he said it all came down to comprehending something as basic and obvious as life. I saw that it was all about life-giving, life-sustaining, and life-nurturing. It is the only part of Godhood that we can begin to understand here. I wanted that perspective, eternal life and eternal love for everyone, and I was willing to commit to whatever was necessary to give them that opportunity. And it was just, when I read that, I'm like, wow, we need to pray for that disposition. I need to pray for that disposition so that I don't feel like I'm clawing somebody or arguing till my eyes are red and my face is red, or I need to have that disposition where I just want to teach truth, and hopefully that I will touch somebody somewhere. And I think that that's where that makes all the difference, when we realize that we can be better advocates, when we just want to have that honest, humbling position, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I love going back to the beginning of the book and compare where he said all the sacrifice isn't worth nothing, and I was starting to be resentful and bitter. And then through his process, that's where he went. That's where he ended up. So. Anybody else? Was I on mute that whole time?
No.
Oh. Oh my. Yeah, did anybody else want to add to that?
Well, in all my classes, I mean, this is my next to the last semester, and I've been writing this, what has changed in the last 20 to 30 years? What has, why, just what do we need to be doing? And I found the sentence is, I hope to turn this around in our next 50-year cycle. When they found the record that the family was originally listed as a family of husband, wife, and children from 1949, I thought, this means that we can have another change. You know, like you can see into the future that it is going to be possible. And again, everything's in God's hands. And I read something the other day by Mother Teresa that said somebody congratulated her for the homes that she had opened in all the many countries. And she says, it's not my doing, but God's, and God's work is wonderful. I just want to be the pencil. I might not be a very sharp pencil, but God writes beautifully.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm seeing the little conversation over here where, it made us all heated. Like 5 years ago, I was really into it, and that's what I would post on Facebook all the time, was a lot of heated conversation. And I had a life-changing moment where I was so caught up in politics that I actually let my temple recommend expire because I was so distracted. And when I went to the temple to go to my niece's, when she's going to go on a mission, she's getting her diamonds, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't let you in." And I looked at the date and I just stared at it. And the Lord said, as I sat outside waiting the 2 hours for everybody to come out, he said, if this is how you're going to approach it, this is where you're going to be. And I finally said, okay, how do you want me to approach this? And it was all about going back and just teaching, or just posting things from LDS.org, period. And there's plenty on there that have what I'm trying to say, but in a much more loving, touching people's hearts way. And I notice that people now respond and people want to hear more. And some people turned me back on because I got turned off by some people. I just wanted to share this list. This is a list that they gave when we went to this conference because we were asked the same question: what do we think our role is? And some people's roles are to educate, which some of you are going to get that chance. Some of our roles are just simply to share. Some of our roles is simply to make aware. Some of us are researchers, so take advantage of that. Some of us just have the ability to speak up. Let's see. Some of us are good at gathering camaraderie and networking. And some of us are just watchdogs. And there's a whole longer list. Those were some ideas to think about as we're, doing our church callings and all those ideas that you guys were saying. I'm really anxious to hear back from you, Michaela, how that goes. That's exciting. I know that with my husband, he felt motivated and inspired as branch president to say that our theme this year was to strengthen families. And it's interesting. I told you this last week, but he's using the 12-step addiction recovery program to do it. So it's kind of interesting. But, so, any other thoughts before we hear our wrap up?
Please. Turn the gas furnace on, it circulates stuff.
So, nobody's nodding yes, so we must be happy with our conversation.
See you later.
No, I think well. I will say one thing that I don't know. I guess these last couple of weeks, and the different things with the United Nations and whatnot, just realizing my own ignorance, and maybe some other areas that I need to step up in and be aware of. Because I started thinking, who is our representative to the United Nations? And I know sometimes it's Hillary Clinton, but it isn't always. And how well are we represented? And, just basic things like that I really didn't know and haven't fully paid attention to. So, I mean, part of it is, the people not realizing the importance of some of those meetings and other things, but, just that specifically.
The awareness part. I wanted to invite you ladies, because the day has come for me from that 10 years ago when I got that book. Next year, my friend and I are going to go to the United Nations, and we can go and observe and help with the NGOs. And you just get to go experiment or experience it, and you go with that group. And if they find assignments for you, they do that. But that's next year. So
exciting.
If you guys feel like just going and experiencing it, you wouldn't go as a representative of any kind because you're more. you are assigned to be watchdogs. You are to listen and pay attention, and you are given information about what buzzwords and codes to watch for, and kind of be tattletales. But that's next year.
People around.
Yeah, so that's next year. If you guys are interested, keep that in mind. So Ashley, do you want to, what do they call it? Brush it up, finish it. I can't think of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overview, summary. Okay, so let me scroll up here. I have several pages. But to the first question, the overall summary is that we were amazed that it's all opinion. It's not up to voting. We go along to get along. People do influence each other. It was up for debate to be changed all the time. There is considerable weight given to certain individuals there, and it's a good reminder that we all have that. It was a good reminder to stand up for what we believe in. So that was the first one. The second one, let's see. What role did you see in the Lord playing in his efforts? And it was, when we know and understand sacred things, we will be able to apply them in important ways. We will be able to say them in a way to communicate to others in a proper way. He kept relating himself to the scriptures. There was nothing that could prevent him from presenting his message. He still had the power to touch and influence other people, and people ultimately know what is right and are drawn to the truth. And no mortal intellect is self-sufficient. I really like that quote. The third question, what supporting roles did you see others playing? And we talked a lot about his wife. And that we do need to act on our promptings. We need to be respectful of others and their backgrounds so that we can stand up for good. We also talked about his friend Susan. Wives are supposed to be supportive, and we are being examples to not just our family. The next question, what do you see the possible consequences and risks of minimizing family and religion? The scripture, 2 Nephi 2, verse 13, when we are taking out God, we are vanishing. Families are who we are. They are a starting point. They bring values, and we can't risk losing those things because it brings stability. We draw our moral values from religion. We will lose our morals because people will just have to wave it past. We can't focus on individualism, but on familyism. Next question. Realistic suggestions. It is important that we share even if we don't know much. Using social media to talk about our families, we need to have that disposition that we want to touch hearts. We need to take the sacrament. People will listen when we are kind and loving. Some of our roles are to educate, share, speak up, research, gathering, or networking, and be watchdogs. We can be advocates by doing little or big things. If we stay close to the Lord, we can come to know what we need to do. We also need to listen to the Spirit and use our resources or our talents. And we just need to start talking about the family. We want to be the pen because God writes beautifully. That's what I have.
That was a good finale. Thank you, Susan. I would love to add the most important message from the book. I shouldn't say that. There was a lot of important message, but in quotations somewhere on there, can you write, do something? That's the only thing I would add. So, okay. I think that's it, ladies. Oh, go ahead.
Question. Have any of you joined that United Families International or the BYUI Facebook page for the Marriage and Families major?
I did the Facebook page.
Okay. I just wondered.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Facebook. And
have any of you joined the United Families International that Marcia Barlow spoke about?
I'm too nervous to join yet. I don't think I'm a very good blogger or anything, so I just.
No, that's why I'm asking you. Did you do it?
You got to take a step forward.
Oh.
I'm in the Family Watch International, which networks with the other one.
Okay. And which book are you referring to from the UN? Katie? Your book?
Oh, Another Person's Story, you mean?
No, the book your friend gave you about the UN. Which one was it?
Oh, it was actually about another woman who and her experience at the UN and how she started Family Watch International. It's called I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, that's okay. You can email me.
Yeah, I would have to email you that book.
Okay.
It was her experience that's very similar to Sacred Duty. She's talked about how she was just there to watch, like I'm going to next year, and it turned into a huge thing for her as she realized what was going on there. So.
Wow, watch
and she's
out.
Also she's also the one that I showed you guys those pamphlets last whenever our conversation. That's where it came. They're the ones that got our buzzwords and no code words, but just our buzzwords and our talking points. So.
Okay. Well, that's neat. You'll have to keep in touch with us so you can let us know how it goes.
Well, I hope you all go with me. You got a year. All right, I think we'll say goodbye for the day. An hour and 7 minutes is plenty of time. So,
Thanks
luck on your guys' homework.
everybody. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.